Welcome to this evening's panel discussion entitled The Student Intifada Panel Discussion with Global Palestine University Encampments, facilitated by the Palestinian Return Center. We will be hearing from students from all around the world and the current wave of student encampments calling for the liberation of Palestine. We have a few speakers this evening, so please do stay online and tune in for all of them. We have students from all around the world joining us. So our first two speakers is Nora and Bianca. So Nora Boras is a Spanish journalist. She is specialized in international law with a master's degree in higher international and European studies from the University of Granada. She focuses on everything that affects Palestine, Arab countries, human rights, and international relations. She has been chosen to begin her master's degree in international reporting with RTVE, Spain's public news channel, this next academic year. She's a member of the BDS movement in the city of Granada, and she's also a part of RESCOP, RESCOP, the Spain Solidarity Network against the occupation of Palestine. She also has a radio program on her own called Shireen's Voice, in honor of the Al Jazeera reporter Shireen Abu Akleh, to the more than 140 Palestinian journalists who have been killed by Israel. The podcast is a space to find the latest news on Palestine and also for analysis and reflection on everything that is happening. And joining her is Bianca Carrera, who is a Spanish freelance journalist based in Egypt, having followed closely the Spanish movement for solidarity with Palestine. Over to you both.
Thank you so much for inviting us today. As you know, Spain, some Spanish politicians and movements have been leading outspoken advocacy for Palestine in the last months, something that has led to the recognition of the state of Palestine alongside Ireland and Norway last Tuesday, 28th, and to the cutting of ties between some universities and Israel. My colleague Nora, who has been deeply involved in the student demonstrations pushing for this last achievement, will later talk about how Spanish universities have mobilized and the milestones witnessed so far. But let me start with some context on the mobilization in Spain for Palestine. Because all the outspokenness and good news we are hearing from our country are the result of decades of popular mobilization and efforts, something that I hope can inspire people in other countries to keep pushing. To start with, years ago, the landscape was completely different to what we see now. Spain is actually a country where Israel has had and has a big presence. The city of Barcelona has had a long-standing cooperation agreement with the State of Israel since 1998, where Barcelona and Tel Aviv were twin cities. Spain has also been home to ACOM, the largest of a series of lobbies that claim their objective is to fight discrimination against Jews and harassment towards Israel and its citizens. However, ACOM has engaged in intimidating activists and city councils taking stands for Palestine. The group has publicly been seen having ties with the Spanish right wing, which is funnily enough the leftovers of a fascist Nazi dictatorship. We also have another sister association, the Friends of Israel Foundation, registered with Pablo Casado as founder, who is the president of the right-wing party PP, alongside a conservative scholar member of the far-right Vox party. This is just to show how close are the Zionist lobbies to power in Spain. Despite that, Spanish civil community has organized itself, mainly led by a Palestinian community that came during the 80s and 90s as students and who tried to raise awareness among the culture's civil society. Some of the milestones that we have witnessed in the past decade is that, for example, the city of Navarra in 2014 approved a declaration calling on Israel to fulfill its obligation under international law and occupation and to end the occupation and colonization of Arab lands. The same year, Sevilla, the City Council of Sevilla declared the Israel ambassador to Spain persona non grata, so he couldn't enter the city. In 2018, the capital city of Valencia, region just beneath Catalonia, declared itself an apartheid-free zone in reference to the BDS campaign. And a few months later, Valencia's regional parliament became the first in the world to approve this BDS demand. In the Basque Country, almost all trade unions, including the biggest ones, released a statement in solidarity with the Palestinian people in response to the 2021 Israel assault on Gaza. And in the rest of the Spanish territory, at least 80 public institutions have declared themselves apartheid-free zones. And in 2023, Barcelona's city mayor declared it would cease cooperation with Israel and to support Palestinians. The move came after a campaign by more than 100 civil society associations, which a few months after being launched had not just reached but surpassed the number of signatures they needed for the request to be presented in the city council. And as I was mentioning earlier, very recently, Spain finally recognized the state of Palestine. But all these gains have happened because of the strong popular mobilization, especially coming from students. As we saw at the beginning, Zionist lobbies might be close to power, but the popular voices have been able to be more loud. My colleague Nora will now explain in detail how this mobilization has played out during the last months of the Israel genocide over Gaza since October 7th.
Thank you very much, Bianca. And thank you very much, Farah, for hosting us in this space where the struggle for the liberation of Palestine in different parts of the world are connected. I consider this meeting very necessary, and it is an honor for us to be here with all of you. So, as Farah has said, I belong to the BDS movement and also to RESCOP, which is the national network that coordinates all the pro-Palestine organizations in Spain. And I have also been part of the encampment at the University of Granada, which has been the first university in Spain to sever academic ties with Israel. So I'm going to expose the current situation of the campus protests in Spain, how we have organized, what we achieved, and also I will talk, as Bianca said, about how Spanish civil society has mobilized over the last 8 months. So in Spain, we have followed the honorable example of the students of Columbia University who have inspired us to protest with our body, tents, and presence. It all started with several meetings in each territory to think about and establish the organization, logistics, and requirements of the camp, and then they began to emerge independently. The first camp to settle in Spain was the University of Valencia. So first, I'm going to mention the common points that all the camps share. The camps have been mobilized and maintained by the students, the core of these protests. Protests have also been joined by non-students, different movements and organizations, as well as Palestinians, Arabs, Spaniards, and people of all nationalities. In the camps, we have also counted on the support of the professors who moved their classes to the camps, and also they have been suggesting to students when to pressure and when to negotiate with the rectorate. It's important to highlight the University Network for Palestine, which is composed of many professors with a presence in more than 40 universities in Spain, and they are a legitimate voice in this fight. So all the camps have been organized internally by commissions, different working groups that have been in charge of security activities, communication, and whatever else was necessary. And an essential activity that takes place every day in the encampments are the assemblies, sometimes lasting up to 4 or 5 hours, and all members are fully and directly involved in decision making. The communication between the camps has been constant to know how each camp was organizing to support each other and also to release common statements to joining forces. So about the current situation of the camps, right now, there are active about 24 camps throughout Spain. The first university, as I said, to take the first step was the University of Valencia on 29 April, and then the students' movement began to expand itself. We have managed to cut Israeli academic relations in 9 universities: Granada, Valencia, Barcelona, Sevilla, Pablo de Olavide, also located in Sevilla, Jaén, Oviedo, and recently Malaga and Tenerife. So what we ask in the camps, in all the universities, we are asking to cut all relations with Israel, companies, and institutions. Each camp asked to end the specific agreements, projects, and relations the university has with Israel or Zionist entities. We also call for the cessation of economic relations with companies complicit in genocide and apartheid, such as the banks Santander and BBVA, which finance the manufacture of weapons, or the HP company whose technology is used by Israel at checkpoints to control and deny the free movement of the Palestinian civilian population. The economic ties are not broken yet, but we continue to demand it, whether in the camps or outside them. It is important to highlight a decisive event that has conditioned the framework of the student movement in Spain and has facilitated the rupture of relations. Few days after the first camps began, on May 9, we received a statement from the CRUE, the Conference of Rectors of Spanish Universities, who represents 76 universities in Spain. They commit in a document, non-binding, to review the agreements with Israeli universities and break ties with those that are not committed to peace and compliance with international humanitarian law. So this was a change of position and discourse of the university and a new framework for students to act, to put pressure and negotiate. It meant that apparently it was possible to cut relations, but we had to keep fighting. So I will tell you what we have achieved at the moment. In Granada, we were the first university in the country to sever relations with Israel after 9 days of encampment. And this break of relations means that mobility of students, professors, and researchers with Israeli universities has been suspended. Also, summer courses, not signing new agreements or participating in new international academic cooperation projects with Israeli universities, intensify relations with Palestinian universities, and also will be suspended the technical cooperation with Israeli institutions in European Commission research consortia in which there is at least one partner of Israeli origin. And there will be no participation in new research agreements or projects with any Israeli university, organization, or institution. That's the case of Granada. Now we move to Barcelona. And in Barcelona, after 17 days of camping, the academic and institutional relations and any possible new agreements with Israeli companies has been suspended. These conditions will remain in place until there is absolute peace and respect for human rights in Gaza. There will be also a monitoring group to verify that that was agreed is fulfilled. And regarding the European projects where Israel participates, the University of Barcelona has said that it won't leave the projects, but will ask the European Union to kick Israel out. So in Malaga, the University of Malaga had agreements with 5 Israeli universities, and they had temporarily suspended relations with Israeli centers until the aggression stops or until Israel issues an explicit statement in favor of peace and condemning the aggression suffered by the Palestinian territories. In Sevilla, the university has cut temporarily their educative relations with Israel, and they will offer aid to Palestinian students. Also in the Pablo de Olavide and in Jaén and Andalusian University, they have cut off the 3 relations they maintained with Israeli institutions and allocate those assigned place to members of Palestinian universities. And in Valencia, the University of Valencia does not currently have any contract, institutional agreement, or academic relations in Israel. But on the same day on the same day, of Spanish recognition of the Palestinian state, they issued a document approving not signing any agreement or collaboration with Israeli institutions while the crimes against Palestinian people do not end and the massive violation of human rights, among other steps they had made. This is some of the achievements we have done, but we have some testimonies of camping that are still resisting. Is the sample in Madrid. The colleges from the Madrid camp have been resisting for 4 weeks and still on. The university broke off any negotiations with the students when 70 students broke into and occupied the rectorate building. And last Friday, they had a meeting with the vice chancellors of 6 public universities in Madrid, who only proposed the arrival of humanitarian aid and development cooperation for Palestine. But they refused to break relations with Israel. So the students continue to insist. In other universities, such as Murcia, will hold an extraordinary meeting tomorrow with the University Senate. So we may be facing another light achievement for Palestine. And anyway, in other universities, as Zaragoza, the students of this place have decided to end the camp and change tactics, continuing with the assemblies and concentrating their efforts on actions that they will carry out in the coming days. The university has broken some ties with Israel, but not all. But anyway, even if the students decide to end the camp, they are still going to mobilizing because they are organized and they are still fighting for Palestine. And that is being the example of Granada, Barcelona, Valencia, and the direction that all the camps that are ending are taking. So to what do we attribute the achievement of severing relations with Israel? Of course, to the effort of all the students and campers have put into making this happen. A lot of organizations sacrificing classes, exams, and personal life. And we also attribute this result to the tireless work of the organizations that fight for the Palestinian people's rights in Spain, which have been tremendously active, organizing concentrations, demonstrations, conferences, doing boycott actions, awareness, and cultural activities, explaining our demandings and what is happening in Palestine. We have invested all our efforts in educating the population about the Palestinian struggle and the decisive role that the civilian population we have in boycotting companies which collaborate with Israel to refuse to funding a genocide. And some boycott campaigns that we have implemented in Spain are being targeting Carrefour, McDonald's, to major dates from occupied territories, to the Basque railway transport company CAF, which is facilitating the expansion and connection of illegal colonies in Jerusalem, and the boycott to the image washing that Israel intended to do at Eurovision and also at Fitur, the international tourism fair, which was held here in Madrid. And we have non-stopped reminding our government that it is being friends with a criminal entity, that what we need right now and what they have to do immediately. They must sever relations with Israel now and applying a real military embargo. Only these measures have real pressure. So all these campaigns that I mentioned are global campaigns from the BDS movement. Every country, all the civil society, can do it and should do it, making pressure for boycotting Israel from any place and any relation with our governments or institutions. And I finished sending a message from Spain to the rest of the camps in the world. Angela Davis said that the student body always leads the way. We won't stop fighting until Palestine is free. So this doesn't end with an encampment, nor with the rupture of academic relations. We need real pressure actions to fight against Israeli impunity and isolate this criminal entity. We have been demanding and fighting for 8 months, and we will keep doing it for Palestinian rights, dignity, and freedom. So, to all the students and all the people, keep fighting. You are on the right side on history, and never stop fighting for the Palestinian people liberation and all people liberation. It is possible to cut relations with Israel. Don't let anyone tell you that it is not possible. And the only way to do it is through mobilization and organized fight. We must maintain our determination. So from the Spanish camps, we send you all our support, and we are with you in this struggle. Humanity is only one. Long life, free Palestine.
Thank you so much, Nora and Bianca, and congrats, Nora, on the success of the Granada encampment. And I hope all the other student encampments across Spain follow suit. And thank you again for both joining us. Our next speaker this evening is Ismail Yaqub. Ismail is part of the Committee for Palestine Society in the Sciences Po University in Paris. And over to you, Ismail.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
If you maybe perhaps speak a bit closer to the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. We're in the middle of like a big meeting. We're gonna things are being planned. So I was not disorganized, but there's a bit of noise. But yeah, I will share some words about like the things we've been doing here in Paris and at Sospo specifically. So obviously at Sospo, we were really successful in our mobilization. We really like responded kind of to the escalation that we were seeing, especially in the United States, but all across the world. And we really managed to create something very special within our university. We were also kind of armed with a very specific contact. Sciences Po is a university that has a lot of international students, a lot of Arab students. So a lot of students who are just kind of like me, you know, we come from a history of colonization, and so naturally we're drawn to the cause. We've been fighting for Palestine for many, many years. And we instrumentalized the space that our university offers us, which is a name very close to power. And this is something that I've been stressing to all other universities that I've been speaking to and helping with their mobilization, is how do you instrumentalize your university? Unfortunately, like, we're at a stage in the world where like it's not 1968 anymore. The student movement can take up momentum, but it's not. There's all matters of reasons why it won't take up in the same way. And one of the strongest like things that I think we have in this moment is understanding how we use the walls of our university rather than hoping for like change to happen on the university. And what I mean by that is us understanding that at Sciences Po, it's a university that has a very big name in France and it's attached to power. And so how do we put an immense amount of pressure on the institution, but also on the wider kind of political situation? And that, in that sense, we were extremely, extremely successful, which is why we were met with the immense amount of repression that we were met with. And so obviously the repression was not nice. The repression was not ideal. For context, if people didn't follow, we had like 4 different camps. Every single camp didn't survive more than 20 24 hours, if that, like 15 hours, because it was just met with police repression. And the scenes we were seeing in our universities are incredible because the normalization of police escalation by universities is something that was extremely unprecedented, but they didn't hold back when it came to this cause. We know why. It's because it's for Palestine, right? And it's because of the immense amount of pressure. And this is what I meant by saying, like, okay, in Spain, for example, you have a different context. I think your demands are being met, and you're dealing with you're dealing with reasonable people. In Salesforce, we're not dealing with reasonable people. We're dealing with like very particular political context. And so what we succeeded to do was put an immense amount of pressure on them, which created a huge like media storm, a huge amount of kind of attention on what is happening at Salesforce. And during this moment, we don't care that like political scene is blowing themselves up and calling us Islamists and calling us like wokeists. We have succeeded to put pressure. And what do we do with that pressure? We mobilize. So as someone who's been mobilizing for many years for Palestine, I've never seen the numbers that we've seen. Use that moment and to mobilize people to do what? To keep disrupting. And the order of the day for me as an activist, like who's very involved here in Paris, it's pushing disruption because it's little too late to be going on the streets for authorized protests, in my opinion. Because, yeah, that should have been happening a long time ago. It has been happening since a long time in all of our cities. And I think now the order of the day is disrupt. And so what did we do with the mobilization we created? We continued to disrupt. So we disrupted the administration's meetings. We disrupted events that were happening in the school to really shock and paralyze institutions. So what did the school do in response? They don't want to talk to their students, so they shut the school down, you know? This is the response. This is we shock and paralyze the institutions, and we bring Palestine on the agenda, and we have to use ourselves. We cannot rely on media, never rely on the media. I think people wait for the media sometimes. Oh, an article, let's get an article. No, the media will never ever be on our side. But use the noise to mobilize within us and to disrupt and to educate and inform and push for Palestine. Don't stop talking about Palestine. Don't stop talking about Gaza. You know, there's a distraction to talk about police repression. We as students are fine. I am a very privileged person. I have a British passport. I'm studying in Paris. So I use my privilege. Obviously, my Arab friends don't have the same privileges as me. So I put myself on the front lines and I will be faced with the police repression. We have reached the point where police repression is so normalized, we need to be directly confronting the police ourselves. Now, I'm not calling for anything for whatever spies are watching this right now. I'm not calling for anything. I'm just saying police repression is so normalized, we need to have people who are ready to face the police repression. That's what I'm saying. And so, you know, this is kind of the moment we've arrived in, and kind of the notes that I've taken from all of the experiences. I would say like what we had in Salesforce was really special, but it was what was the result of mobilization and strategy, and not waiting. I think a lot of problems we have with mobilization is we're waiting around for things to happen spontaneously. Unfortunately, especially in the type of world we live in, that doesn't work. We really need to be taking initiative, and the initiative also really needs to be centering Palestinian people who have been living this injustice their whole lives for 75 years. We also need to be listening to people who have been mobilizing for a long time. And also, of course, everyone needs to be involved, but there's an element of commitment that people need to understand. And, you know, understanding your level of commitment, the level of risk you're going to take, understanding how we participate and organize our movement along these lines, I think is really important in this moment now, where it should be no business as usual. We should be blocking the streets. We should be occupying the universities. We should be thinking about how we take the momentum out of the student movement now that, you know, school semesters are breaking up, exams are kind of wrapping themselves up. Because the summer, we have to all be, you know, uniting ourselves and disrupting on the streets. So yeah, that's like a little bit of what I had to say. If you have any questions, and I'm always here to talk, and I really like to coordinate with other young student movements. We are Kumite, I'll put it in the chat, Palestine SCPO on Instagram. Our DMs are open. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or anything, I'm here. And yeah, thanks guys. And these calls are really important. This coordination and solidarity as well in these moments is really, really important.
And just wanted to amplify kind of all the support you have from the rest of us all around the world with your encampment, and the same goes with all encampments still going right now. Thank you again for joining us. The third speaker of today's panel discussion is Jessie Rubin. Jessie Rubin is a PhD candidate in ethnomusicology, currently researching Irish and Palestinian solidarity in Belfast, Ireland. She was a founding member of Columbia University Apartheid Divest as an undergraduate student and continues to organize with CUAD as a proud union member of Student Workers of Columbia. Over to you, Jessie.
Thank you so much for that introduction. I guess I just want to start off by saying that I've never been more proud to call myself a Columbia student, not because of the school's elite reputation as an Ivy League, not because of its famous alumni or its fancy labs and libraries, but because of our brave student protesters who not only set up the first Solidarity encampment, which inspired dozens of encampments across the country and now the world, but also courageously occupied Hamilton Hall, the same building occupied by anti-Vietnam War protesters in the 1960s and anti-South African apartheid activists in the 1980s, renaming it Hinds Hall in honor of the martyred 6-year-old Palestinian girl. The majority of these students are undergraduates with a median age of around 20, but they've shown us what real steadfast leadership can and should look like. You might not be surprised to hear that Columbia's bosses like to boast of its history of student activism. In fact, when prospective students tour the school, guides proudly show them where the 1968 anti-war and the 1985 South African divestment protests took place. What they conveniently leave out, of course, is the administration's legacy of calling on the police to beat up and arrest its students. And this legacy continues into the present, of course. In the past weeks, our young leaders have been knocked unconscious, pushed downstairs, and pepper sprayed by hundreds of cops in full riot gear. One cop even fired a gun inside of Hind Hall. But this has not deterred students. It's only made them more committed to their cause and only inspired more students around the world to join the movement. This steadfastness and unwavering commitment is exciting because we know from experience that this kind of student pressure works. In the spring of 1985, students occupied Hamilton Hall. In the fall of 1985, the university divested from South African apartheid. And as an undergraduate, I saw the success of student activism firsthand. In addition to my Palestine solidarity work as an undergrad, I also organized with Columbia Divest for Climate Justice, or CDCJ. In April of 2016, I was one of the students who occupied Low Library, sleeping bag in tow, for a week to demand divestment from fossil fuels. Our week-long occupation of the university president's office played a huge part in the university's subsequent divestment from thermal coal that same year. Unsurprisingly, our sit-in was construed by the press and by our administration as more tame. Despite this purposeful breaking of the rules of conduct, we were not met with police brutality. We were not arrested, expelled, or kicked out from our housing. The only consequence issued by Columbia administration was for the members involved in the sit-in to write handwritten apologies to public safety for the inconvenience that we caused. And I was actually recently told that the letter that I wrote is still hanging in the public safety office to this day. The university has once again shown its hand, acting not as the caretakers of the campus community they are supposed to be, but instead as mindless followers of the demands of the Zionist donor classes. This is precisely why we see such a stark difference in the treatment of our students mobilizing around Palestinian liberation. The terrifying grip of wealthy Zionist institutions such as the Anti-Defamation League and the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, who have for decades lined the pockets of our politicians, has not only had severe ramifications for the state of free speech and assembly and academic freedom on college campuses across the United States, but has also put our students in physical danger. Billionaire investor Leon Cooperman publicly declared that he is stopping giving money to Columbia because they did not crack down hard enough on student protesters. Meanwhile, students were literally hospitalized for injuries inflicted by police on our campus. And I'm sure that many of you saw the now infamous WhatsApp chat between Mayor Eric Adams and the Zionist billionaires and executives who urged him to use police to deal with the protests on Columbia's campus. And we, of course, see the influence of the wealthy Zionist lobby written into federal policy. On October 26th, the US Senate passed a resolution led by Republican Senator Josh Hawley that attempts to silence and police student activists via a condemnation of supposedly anti-Semitic and pro-Hamas student groups, including Students for Justice in Palestine. The Senate's official censure of student rhetoric is a categorical attack on students' historically established free speech rights. The resolution goes so far as to paint New York University's chapter of Students for Justice in Palestine's assertion that there is no peace in a colonized people living under occupation, subjugation, and apartheid as anti-Semitic, dangerously equating a critique of settler colonialism with anti-Jewish hate speech and purposely muddying the definition of Zionism, a colonial political project, with Judaism and Jewishness. This has only added fuel to the fire to the McCarthy-esque, racially targeted, and Islamophobic student doxing campaigns of far-right organizations such as Canary Mission and Accuracy in Media. Anti-Zionist student activists have been continuously subjected to Columbia administration's strategic and selective implementation of draconian disciplinary rules despite their best efforts to comply with administration. Last semester, we saw an unprecedented cancellation of an event with esteemed Palestinian writer and poet Mohammed al-Kurd, hosted by Barnard Center for Research on Women and organized by Students for Justice in Palestine, and the suspension of Students for Justice in Palestine and Jewish Voice for Peace following a peaceful walkout, which chair of the Special Committee on Campus Safety, Gerald Rosenberg, deemed threatening. And now this most recent violent crackdown on student activists at Columbia, just months after the Senate resolution, further underscores how the university is working hand in glove with various other agents of the Zionist lobby to fortify our racist surveillance state. The funny but not funny thing is Columbia is much better at the racist part than they are at the surveillance part. During the CU apartheid divest encampment, there were more than a handful of accounts of Arab students receiving suspension and eviction notices for their supposed role in the encampment, even though they actually hadn't even been a part of it. Their only crime was being brown at an elite institution. But despite all of this, students, staff, faculty, and alumni involved in the movement for Palestinian liberation have bravely constructed an alternative ecosystem to protect all of our students, and especially the most vulnerable in the community, thus showing us what a university can and should be. The university should be a people's university, a place fueled by mutual aid efforts, collective education projects, and non-hierarchical decision-making processes. And at the People's University, everyone has their own part to play. No part is too great or too small. No one is too old or too young to do something, to use the words of Irish hunger striker Bobby Sands. Indeed, even though I've been far from campus this year, it has been inspiring to see everyone play their part, and I feel lucky that I've gotten to play my part while abroad. Outside of physically camping out, I've seen my comrades do daily food and supplies runs, offer up legal advice and their expertise as legal observers, provide jail support to those arrested, provide community healthcare services, work tirelessly at public communications and social media, write detailed divestment proposals, engage with administration as negotiators, and so much more. Students built a community library and curated full days of educational activities. For example, a colleague in my department gave a lecture on Palestinian music making and storytelling in the resistance. Students led prayers, organized a Passover Seder, and invited some of the most influential activists of our time to come give speeches. And Alternative People's graduation was also organized at a nearby church, which celebrated the moral clarity of the student protesters in the face of university repression, and featured incredible speakers, including Palestinian-American activist Luda Erekat, author Adrienne Marie Brown, and a recorded message from Palestinian journalist Hind Khuriri from Gaza, who declared, "You give us hope. Keep protesting. We are still being bombed. We are still being killed. Hopefully, I'll see you one day soon when all of this ends." Just hours before the People's graduation, the faculty at the Arts and Sciences School at Columbia passed a vote of no confidence in the university president, Manoush Shafiq, which condemned her unprecedented assault on students' rights, after she invited police on campus twice to arrest protesting students. As a graduate worker in the Student Workers of Columbia, I helped to organize a grading stick-out strike with my colleagues, where hundreds of us called in sick and successfully withheld over 1,000 grades in solidarity with students facing disciplinary action and in solidarity with the movement for divestment. Alongside our undergraduate students turned comrades, we effectively showed the university that we would not accept business as usual under the current restrictive and violent circumstances. We organized solidarity pickets outside of the campus and worked within our respective departments to get faculty to write department-wide letters in support of student activists. Faculty members in FSJP, Faculty and Staff for Justice in Palestine, also organized their own small, albeit strike and a really large walkout as well. I will say that it's not been an easy task to mobilize our faculty at Columbia. There's much fear of retaliation, and it's actually been the most vulnerable faculty, contingent and non-tenured, who have been the most willing to take risks. I have hope that with time we'll get more faculty on board and get more faculty to make students' safety and freedom of speech a priority. The semester has ended, which means most students are not on campus anymore, but it is of the utmost importance that we keep the momentum going to the best of our ability. Columbia has just resumed disciplinary hearings for students and are not allowing faculty members to be in attendance at these hearings. And there have also been ongoing staff firings. In the coming weeks, we'll continue to organize against this with a number of initiatives currently underway, including a new Palestinian-led encampment, while also keeping the focus at the core of why we protest. We protest for divestment from apartheid, divestment from genocide, and for the liberation of Palestine from the river to the sea. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jessie, for your input. It was really interesting to hear the history of Columbia's encampments and the double standards and using it to actually entice students to join the university, and then whilst at the same time cracking down on actual encampments happening today. Thank you again. Our next speaker of today's panel discussion is Mohammed Mustafa. Mohammed is a first-generation Palestinian immigrant from the occupied city of Nablus. At 19, he is already a dedicated social media strategist, content creator, and community organizer and activist. Pursuing a degree in communication studies, Mohammed is also the founder and executive chair of the Palestine Diaspora Movement, working to further the fight for Palestinian national liberation. Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you so much, Farah, and thank you to the Palestine Return Center for inviting me to speak. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina wa lana wa habibina Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wa hlul 'uqdatan min lisani yafqahu qawli. O my Lord, expand my heart, ease my task for me, untie the knot of my tongue, and allow them to understand my speech. Students across North America took the solidarity movement by storm. Over 100 encampments erupted in a matter of days, lifting the movement to new heights and setting the example of commitment to our struggle. The demands of the encampments revealed the deep connections between ruling class institutions and the Israeli settler states. The popular university exposed the hypocrisies of higher education in the imperial core, and the brutal suppression that followed is a testament to the pressure the student movement exerted over the ruling class. On April 25th, after being unlawfully arrested and violently beaten by the Ohio State University Police Department, I shared a moment of dua with my fellow protesters who were also illegally arrested alongside me. During this peaceful demonstration, while our heads were in sujood during prayer, officers began their violent police raid, brutalizing us in prayer, ripping the hijabs off of Palestinian women, and beginning an absolutely horrific police suppression tactic that we have seen repeat itself across the nation and across the world. And during this night, while we were at this encampment at the Ohio State University, we were reminded that this college campus, although they might promote the theories of liberation and the theories of freedom and equality for all in the classrooms, they will never take those theories and practice outside of the school. They will continue to teach us the textbooks about radical activism and continue to accept us and enroll us into their universities for our activism and advocacy for human rights. But when we put it into practice, when we begin to test these institutions, they begin to pull back on these very lessons that they taught us. And that is exactly what we saw at the Ohio State University. As we mark not only the growing popular university movement, but also the 76th year commemoration of the Nakba and approach the actual Naksa, it is on this day that Zionists will celebrate the establishment of the most brutal and fascist regime in modern history. And it is on this day that Palestinians remember the greatest tragedy in our collective memory. And at the same time, when Zionists had begun a mass ethnic cleansing and mass rape campaign in Palestine, their goal has remained the same: to displace, dispossess, and eradicate Palestinians. And in 1948, these Zionist terrorist gangs established the settler colony of Israel on stolen Palestinian land. And after that, they began to export their violence outside of their colonial borders. And one of the ways that the settler colony exported its violence is not only by the way that it has immense control and influence over the United States Congress, but also how it has begun to train American police. And we have seen the tactics that the American police force has used on student encampments, and how they are extremely similar to what IOF soldiers will do to Palestinians in the occupied West Bank or in the 48 lands. So from the Ohio State University, at the encampment for Gaza, it was at a late Thursday night on April 25th, and a horde of police and state troopers threatened peaceful protesters with arrest at the university's request. When students and community members bravely stood their ground in solidarity with Gaza, the police began extremely violently attacking the crowd while Muslim worshippers were peacefully praying Salat al-Isha, or the night prayer. And despite the brutality and the arrest at the university's behest, students and community members stood firm and unwavering against the violence inflicted upon them for hours, empowered by the revolutionary spirit of resistance. The Ohio State University, as one of the largest public institutions in the United States of America, must be held accountable for its role in perpetuating violence and injustice. By choosing to maintain multi-billion-dollar investments in Israeli weapons manufacturing, they are complicit in not only the apartheid, the genocide, but overall the Zionist settler colonialism of Palestine, directly contributing to the ongoing mass murder of Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. None of the actions seen at the encampments for Gaza are new for the Ohio law enforcement and OSU. In 1968, during protests against U.S. genocide against Vietnam, the police brutality arrested over 40 students. And again, in April of 1970, during an anti-racist protest on the Ohio State University, the university leaders actually summoned 1,200 members of the National Guard, leading to dozens of arrests and even more injuries. Today, students and communities around the country are mobilizing to fight against the genocide, while the state sticks to the police like dogs to violently attack them. In this country, the police only exist to protect the interests of the capitalist state. Time and time again, the police target working class people, and especially Black and brown communities, with extreme horrific violence. The racist system has enacted a policing structure that kills our people, as evidenced by the murders of individuals such as Colin Jennings, Maika Bryant, Andrea Hill, Casey Goodson, and countless others. The repression of students is not new either. The Ohio State University has made their decision. They chose to support genocide and unleash police repression and terror upon their students and community members. Their fear of the power of the people is evidenced by their extreme response to the protest. It is the final grasps of a dying empire. But we will not stop fighting for Palestine, and our voices will not be silenced. And matter of fact, we will continue to be louder and more proud of our resistance and our movements, the more that they try to suppress us and stop us. Al-Nakba, as we remember, is not a historical event. It is an ongoing system of massacres, land theft, starvation, and genocide that works to destroy the Palestinian presence. It works to destroy the Palestinian land and life. Al-Nakba is a monster who feeds on the lands of indigenous people, whose appetite for destruction grows more uncontrollable every day. And whether on campus encampments, university encampments at The Ohio State University, or any other university across the country or the world, or protests across the globe for Palestine, we are reminded of the complicity of these corrupt officials who do not represent us, genocide supporters and enablers of mass murder. They will claim that they want peace and justice and dignity for people, but they continue to confessedly defend and empower a fascist settler colonial state in which the ends justify the means. where occupation soldiers have paraded for over 8 months over decimated cities in Gaza, trampling over the bodies of our beloved martyrs, subjecting our women to humiliation or feasting in the homes from which they have displaced Gazans. And when the lifeless bodies of Palestinian children dangle from the edges of their homes, they dare to dismiss our calls for liberation, for freedom, for resistance as too political. We are here to share our stories, to expose the hypocrisy and the Western brutality that we face, and to motivate everyone to stand even stronger in our struggle. What we experienced is not even a fraction of the hardship endured by our Gazan brothers and sisters. May Allah protect them. We are honored to fight with them, and we are honored that this solidarity movement has shown our collective power and the importance of our fight. It is through our resilience that we will achieve collective liberation. And whether these university officials or politicians who claim to represent our interests attempt to suppress us or call the National Guard or police in riot gear or military-grade helicopters to fly across college students and community members who are peacefully demonstrating, that will not intimidate us. And matter of fact, it will only show us that they are genuinely scared, and it isn't a dying empire taking its final breaths. Something that is so interesting to me as I was living through this police suppression at The Ohio State University was the targeting is not only happening to Palestinians, it's happening to everyone associated with Palestinians, right? And so under the viewpoint discrimination in Title VI, it is illegal to discriminate against race, color, or national origin. And even though these police were completely using discrimination as a tool for them to sift through the protesters and arrest Black and brown, especially Palestinian demonstrators. What we see here in Ohio is that while we send nearly $500 million to the Zionist entity every year, we are reminded that it is our obligation to stand in front of our representatives and make our demands clear that we will not allow an ongoing genocide of our people to take place while remaining silent. And what I would like to take away from this, or what I would like people to take away from this, is that although you may face intimidation and suppression, whether it be from authority figures at your university or politicians, we are reminded that this is our collective struggle. And through this collective struggle, we have demonstrated our collective power. And I'm grateful for the time here to share my story and my experience. And most importantly, I'm grateful to Farah and the Palestinian Return Center for giving us the opportunity and the space to share our stories from the university encampments. I would like to say that whether come hell or high water, we will never stop for our fight for Gaza or for Palestine. And especially as diaspora Palestinians, we are reminded of our place and our goal and role in this larger struggle for liberation. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our people and grant our martyrs the highest levels of Jannah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our martyrs and protect our people against all harm. Ameen.
Thank you so much, Mohammed, for joining us today, and all power to you and all students across America right now in the belly of the beast, resisting not only the oppression in Palestine but also American imperialism. Thank you so much again, Mohammed. Our next speaker today. There's two speakers. It's Chris Kunzler and Leah Vague, joining us from the University of Exeter, who are part of the Exeter Liberation Encampment for Palestine. Over to you both.
Hello. It's really hard to follow that up because that was unbelievable. Thank you so much, Mohammed. Genuinely amazing. So right now I'm currently at home, and I have been for quite a few days, whereas Leah has been at the encampment the entire time pretty much and has barely left. However, one of the things that I really wanted to say about the encampment is, whilst we're well aware that we're there for Palestine and we're there for important reasons, one of the most interesting parts about Exeter's encampment is it feels to me that we've recuperated the parts of the university that actually have some merit to them. We're incredibly lucky in Exeter because it's a small town or a small city in the southwest of England, so you wouldn't really expect much pro-Palestinian advocacy. However, we're blessed by one of the best Palestine research centers in the entirety of Europe, with professors like Ilan Pape, who are globally famous, and also Nadia Nassar Najab, who is an excellent lecturer, teacher, and who herself was an activist in the first Intifada. And so throughout the time we've been at the encampment, we've been blessed by incredible lectures, and we've generally been able to recuperate these parts of the uni that I feel like actually have some merit to them. Beyond all of the horrific bureaucracy that we've been dealing with for 8 months, we have this feeling of community, and we have this element of being taught by and being respected by staff and actually a massive local community in Exeter, who I would just like to thank for all of the stuff that they have done for us, bringing us food, supplies, and everything we have needed. We have been incredibly well looked after. But generally, in terms of dealing with the university, our experience has been very different to American universities and also seemingly French universities, because our experience has been incredibly hands-off from the university. They've pushed back our negotiation date over and over again until tomorrow, which Leah will talk about much more than I will. But for example, we had the open day, which was our big escalation. Now for the open day, and this is one of the things that I really want to say, because I make videos and a lot of people say, oh, you're Chris Kunzler, you do these things, blah, 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 blah. It is honestly incredible how wonderful so many of our students are, and the innovative ways that we found to resist and kind of annoy the university. I don't really know a better term to put it, because throughout the open day, rather than everyone taking actions that put them at risk, we tried lots of different things. So we had on the first day, which was on Friday, we had a long piece of fabric where we wrote the names of the martyrs between the age of 0 to 3. We put it down on Forum Hill, and we did, which is a sort of main part of the university, and we did a die-in, which was in many ways rather powerful. We managed to shut down the Senate meeting a week ago, which was also a very significant event because the university management all had to leave their lovely meeting after ignoring us for months on end. And then throughout the day on the open day, we also had things like students walking around with speakers playing a short clip about the university's involvements with arms companies, which interested quite a lot of people. Leah, along with a couple of other students, made these fantastic brochures, which were kind of a parody of the university's own brochures, which had the statistics of Exeter's involvements with the arms trade, because unlike other universities, our involvement is specifically through research partnerships with companies like Kinetic that are effectively in line with UK government policy, but have export licenses to Israel. And so we kind of tried to be educating the students, because the uni were like, do not tell students that they cannot or should not come to Exeter. So our spin was make an informed choice in the hope that some of the people that we attract in the future will be acutely aware of what Exeter is like as an institution, and that they know that it has all of these involvements in the arms trade, because realistically, there is no or very limited universities in the UK which have any positive relationship with Palestine, even though we have this centre which profits from Palestinian labour, and also, may I add, a much wider community of experts in Kurdistan, decolonial politics, feminism, anything that you can imagine. One of the most difficult parts, I think, is the faculty has stood up massively and are very supportive. However, one of the things is it feels as if only the junior staff are willing to risk stuff. On the whole, there are senior staff who are willing to do it, but it seems as if only junior staff are willing to come to our encampment and kind of support us wholeheartedly, whereas some senior staff have not been as present. And I don't speak to sort of chastise any of them specifically, but generally this is actually the feeling from certain staff members as well. And on Saturday, we made the decision as well to carry on with the vast majority of our actions and to shut down the university's careers fair, which we were successful in. They thought that they were only leaving for 15 minutes. However, for the rest of the day, there was no more careers fair. And, you know, it feels as if it's kind of harsh on prospective students who want to come to Exeter, who want to find out stuff about the careers fair. But, you know, I think our whole point is that we go back to the university and say, meet us, listen to us. We have Palestinian students who has come from Gaza to be at the University of Exeter with lecturers like Ilan Pape, whose work is fantastic, not just Ilan's, but these students as well, is unbelievable. And yet the university can't even pay them a modicum of sympathy when she tells them that her brother was killed by the Zionist entity. Multiple of her family members have been treated in this way. I believe she had to reach out to Wellbeing herself. And when they met with the Vice Chancellor and she told them that her brother had died, none of them even offered her their condolences. And so I think that this has been one of the things, we spoke about what we can actually achieve, and what we achieve will be found out through negotiations, which Leah will speak out. However, I hope that an institutional memory is left within Exeter, that the students can really stand up, because this is I've been at Exeter for on and off 5 years. However, when it was Sheikh Jarrah and all of the protests around it, and also Israel's last aggression in Gaza, even though I was involved in the institute, because of the COVID, not knowing as many of the older students, I did not feel very involved. However, this time it feels as if a wide collection of students from many different things, from climate-related protesting movements, have come together to say that this university has failed us completely. Its relationships with Tel Aviv, which were entered, I believe, maybe 4 months into the genocide in Gaza, are shameless. I mean, it was established before. However, there should in no way be of doing this. And I think that just generally, the main thing that we can take away from it thus far is that the actions have been effective, and Leah will speak to that, but also this fact of there is good within this morally bankrupt institution. And when we move beyond this neoliberalism and become the students who are the university, I really think that we can do something. And I'll let Leah talk more about the negotiations now.
I think Chris summed it up pretty well, but I'll just continue and say that this university has a very inherently racist past that they've done a lot of work to cover up. And so a lot of our movement, especially here in Exeter, has been about picking at the threads of their hypocrisy and just revealing it for what it is. We firmly believe that they cannot keep acting in the name of diversity and inclusion, while, as Chris mentioned, neglecting the safety of Palestinian and pro-Palestinian students. They allow for an organization called Camera to operate on campus. It has publicized the faces of multiple students, including myself. And it was actually, incidentally, the entry point that I made into this collective movement was completely by accident. And it was because I was subjected to racist hate beyond belief, and the university did absolutely nothing about it. They consistently have subjected and told their students that they don't care about them. And their violence is completely different. I mean, we're obviously very privileged to know that we haven't yet interacted with physical violence and police violence in the way that a lot of the American academic institutions have faced, which are completely abysmal. But the silence that we face and the apathy that our university has treated us with has been completely, indescribable. And it's the tactic that they keep going. I mean, even today, after agreeing to negotiations, after agreeing to setting an agenda on Friday, the university has decided that the vice-chancellor will no longer meet with us because of our actions on open day, bearing in mind, suggesting that we didn't act in the university's values. The university values are of sustainability, of diversity, of respect. They're all values that university cannot fulfill themselves, that we as a collective fulfill better than the university does. And yet they have now changed the agenda of the meeting, refused to talk about our demands. This is after 8 months of protesting, after 3 weeks of encamping, and now they've pushed it even more so to refuse to engage with us. And it's time as a collective. This is something that the majority of, I think, the UK universities are facing, rather than violence on a physical level. It's been violence through this way of starving us out of communication. It's a complete lack of address. It's some universities haven't even been told where their vice chancellor has been. Many of us have never even seen them, and it's a completely different form that we're trying to interact with, because there's no reaction. It's just, how do you communicate with a brick wall? And I think we are making strides to some extent. I mean, there have been things that have been done. There's been a commitment that the university made previously to the encampment for providing some financial support for scholarship students that were Palestinian. There's also been some extension support for projects and for academic work. But I mean, it's not enough. It's not nearly enough, especially when the university can't seem to condole students who have lost family members. And I think the university seem to treat us as if we are children, but as I think all of us across this whole panel have really been able to demonstrate, is that doesn't matter if we are 20 years old, doesn't matter if you're an undergraduate student, if you're a master's student, if you're a PhD student, we mean business, and we expect these negotiations, and we expect an answer to our demands because they are reasonable. And they're within our right to ask for them, because our education should absolutely and never should have and never should ever again coexist with the murder, the humiliation, the dehumanization of a people, of any people. But it's relentless, and it's that silence that continues. And I think that that's the biggest hurdle that we're especially facing, is that the disruption is working, but it's a money game. And as long as we can't promise they'll lose as much money through us as cutting ties, then we just have to keep upping the ante and forcing them to believe that we do have something to say, and it's important, and that they can't mask it under a new logo or new coloring or changing their strategy to include some fancy new words.
Yeah, just to add, to finish up, even on the open day, after, you know, telling us, oh, we protect and care about students, you know, we were faced by constant ill behavior of, you know, adults taking their kids to these open days. One man tried to physically assault a student, and the university campus didn't even kick him. The university security didn't even kick this guy off campus. And actually later, whilst we were protesting, he was kind of waiting in the corner and the security weren't taking him away. And the student who had been threatened by him was still in this position. There was another gentleman who was filming students in their face, asking them, what does from the river to the sea mean? And just generally, the university continually fails us. And I think what Leah said, it's kind of like you know, we're blessed to never have been attacked with rubber bullets like the people at Columbia were, met with counter protesters like the people at UCLA who are actually physically violent. But the truth is the university has offered us no protection. As Leah said, her face was put online, and the level of racist abuse that she was subjected to was unbelievable. The student from Gaza, one of the students at Exeter from Gaza, the abuse that she was subjected to by gutter papers in the UK, publishing private messages from us, and having this organization, Camera, which handed out leaflets which spoke about the siege of Gaza being legitimate, starvation and cutting off fuel being an acceptable tactic. They spoke about the Intifada, called it terrorism, excluded the fact in the second Intifada that 3,000 plus Palestinians were murdered. And this is why I would say I don't think it is wrong to call it violence, because it is this symbolic form of just complete apathy and complete disregard, regardless of how stressed, how sick we're getting as a result of the failure of the university. They do nothing. And I think that this is why I just have no sympathy for when they tell us, oh, you failed in terms of our university's commitments to this or that, because ultimately it is us who have been failed. We are the students, and they have a duty to safeguard us, and yet they refuse to do it. And until they do, this is not stopping, and our behavior will not change until they change. So thank you all for listening, unless Leah has something to add.
Thank you very much, and thank you both, Chris and Leah, for your inputs, and huge solidarity with both of your efforts. And if you ever find yourself in a position where literally all of the ruling class's tools are coming after you, gutter rag papers, the university establishments who have now become massive corporations, really, then you know you're on the right side of history. And I just want to say a huge, I'm Palestinian, I want to say a huge thank you for everything you're doing. I am not a student anymore, but I was a few years ago, and was very active on Campus for Palestine, and they deployed the exact same tactics to us. And targeting their open days and anywhere they make money is exactly the targets you should be aiming towards, and see if they have any more coming up. But huge solidarity with both of you, and thank you very much for your time. Our final speaker of today's panel discussion is Nader Ahmoud. So Nader is the editor-in-chief of Palestine in America, a quarterly publication based in Chicago. He founded the print and digital magazine in 2014 after getting his bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from Columbia College, Chicago. Over to you, Nader.
Thank you for having me, Farah. Thank you, everybody, and all the speakers. that spoke before me. Just would like to lead off by saying a lot of the things that each of these speakers have spoke about, I have witnessed as a journalist on site at encampments here in Chicago. I have covered Northwestern University, which is just outside of Chicago in Evanston, DePaul University, which is in the Lincoln Park neighborhood in the heart of Chicago, and then the University of Chicago, which is on the south side. And I just want to start off by giving a little bit of context, because here in Chicago, with such a large Palestinian community, these student activists that, where they haven't had encampments before, but they've been pushing for divestment for over a decade, for nearly 2 decades. And I've been covering student activism, in particular to the Palestinian cause, since around 2014, so 10 years now. And they were one of the first universities in the United States, even Loyola University, which is also in Chicago, UIC, which is in Chicago as well. They were some of the first schools to bring divestment to, their student governments. And they were met with repression back then and ignored and gaslit the same way students are being gaslit now. But because, mashallah, because the movement has grown so much in the last 10 years and has exponentially grown in the last 8 months since October 7th, now they're starting to use police repression. Here in Chicago, I think they took a little bit of notice of what happened in New York with sending in police to Columbia. And we do have a pretty progressive mayor here, Brandon Johnson. Some would, say that he's pro-Palestinian. He did deliver the decisive vote at City Council a few months ago, around 4 months ago, to pass a ceasefire resolution. He could do more, but a lot of people said that, and it was reported on, that he told CPD to not get involved in these encampments. He did not want CPD to get involved in these encampments. However, the schools were disingenuous. Northwestern ended up, negotiating with their university, and in my opinion, I think they gave in too soon. However, they came to an agreement. But what I did like about Northwestern was it spawned autonomous students to do disruptive acts throughout the rest of the semester. But I feel like they could have kept their encampment going much longer. There was no police threat. Evanston Police is a small police department. They could not handle they didn't have enough police officers, and the university didn't have enough police officers to handle that large of a crowd. But I digress. Now, DePaul and University of Chicago lasted much longer, but they were both met with police repression in the morning around 4:30 each time. It was very planned. The first one to go down was University of Chicago. And like I said, Brandon Johnson, the mayor of Chicago, refused to send CPD in. So the university sent their own police in with riot gear, and no students were arrested, but they did beat up a few students. And the university ultimately held a few diplomas from students, even Palestinian students, and they targeted them, even though there was thousands of people at these protests and at these encampments from day to day. The school targeted 3 or 4 Palestinian and Black and brown students and held their diploma. They allowed them to walk a few days ago. There was a protest, and again, there was police repression at that protest where students were sprayed with mace and beaten back with batons. So despite the mayor asking these schools not to use police repression, they're still continuing to do so, because that's how ingrained Zionism is into these institutions. And that's pretty much what I've been witnessing on the ground. There was a moment at University of Chicago's encampment where Proud Boys and Zionists, they gathered, hundreds of them, and they stormed the encampment. And police were there, CPD was there, and the University of Chicago police were there, but they did not step in to protect the encampment. The students and their supporters stood their ground, protected the encampment, and about 15 to 20 minutes later, the university police built up a line of police officers to separate the two. And eventually the Zionists, like they do normally, because they can never stick around or stand to their guns, they left, and the encampment kept going on peacefully. But a few days later, the university president sent in school police officers, and they were violent, and they shut down the encampment. But what they don't understand is the movement has, it has set sail, it's left the station. It's not just Palestinian students. It's not just Arab students on campuses. It's not just Muslim students on campuses. It's almost a majority of these students. They don't want their money to be used for war and to kill children. This generation has had enough. And honestly, 10 years ago, when I first started my career in journalism and I was covering these student activists, I thought things weren't moving fast enough and things weren't escalating. But these students are escalating. So just because these encampments have been shut down doesn't mean they're not going to pop back up, as we've seen at the University of at Columbia University, which we do have a reporter that's on the ground there, Jude Taha. She'd be a great person to follow, Palestinian journalist that's on the ground that just graduated from Columbia. And we have, reporters all across the country. We're a small organization, but we're trying to cover these encampments as best we can. But yeah, so I really just want to let you guys know that as an observer, somebody who's been, just reporting and just writing what they see, I'm very proud of these students. A lot of people, I know I might have even been a little bit harsh on Northwestern earlier, but these are, at the end of the day, students that are picking up the brunt of these efforts. And without them, there would be no escalation. We wouldn't be seeing the progress that we're seeing. So it's you students that are causing the ruckus that is affecting change. And I talk to other reporters while I'm on the scene, Chicago Tribune reporters, and you're seeing coverage change. They can't continue to cover these things the way they've been covering them because the masses are calling them out. And so if you guys keep up the work that you guys are doing, I see great things in the horizon. And that's just coming from a journalist who's been covering student activism for the last 10 years. So again, thanks, Farah, for having me and for letting me tell you guys about what I've been witnessing on the ground here in Chicago. Keep up the good work. I'll continue to try to tell you guys stories, but you guys are also storytellers. So it was an honor to be on this panel with the rest of you storytellers. Continue telling our stories. And I appreciate y'all standing up for Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nader, for your time and your input there. It's always a pleasure to have you on and hear your insight. Just wanted to wrap up and say a huge thank you to all of our speakers, to Nora, to Bianca, to Ismail, to Jesse, to Chris, to Leah, to Mohammed, and Nader. Thank you all for your time and huge solidarity with your encampments and everything you're doing for Palestine. Please do keep your eye on the Palestinian Return Center's social media, as PRC has more webinars coming up and panel discussions just like these. Thank you and good evening.